My dad earned a living before he retired as a computer network administrator, but we all knew that was not his passion. He had gone to forestry school earlier in his life at the ESF program at Syracuse University, and the outdoors was his passion. So when we were kids, it was pretty common, whatever we were doing, to have it interrupted right in the middle with my dad saying, just a minute, just a minute. He would do that all the time. Just a minute, just a minute. And we knew that he was listening for some faraway bird call or some kind of animal sound that would give him a clue as to what was in the vicinity. Sometimes we would say to him, Dad, what do you hear? And he'd say, just a minute, just a minute. He couldn't hear if we were asking him questions. He couldn't hear if there was a lot of other noise around. He was straining to listen to whatever that sound was. And that's what we're hearing today. The shepherd is the voice of safety. The shepherd is the guiding impulse in our lives. That voice is what helps us to find our way forward one step at a time. The challenge for us is that our shepherd does not speak out loud. The shepherd speaks very quietly inside of us. And what we need to do in order to hear the shepherd is what my dad did to hear those faraway birds. Just a minute. Just a minute, everybody. My dad would take the list of birds that he heard every day. He'd keep a little spiral notebook in his pocket, and he would write down all of those birds, and he would mail the list off to Cornell, where they would use that information to keep track of what birds were migrating around upstate New York. But that is exactly what our challenge is now, to figure out how to have our little spiral notebook, to write down either actually with ink or at least mentally and emotionally what our shepherd is telling us. We have to spend some time and energy doing that, now more than ever. The famous author Elizabeth Gilbert wrote a blockbuster memoir over a decade ago called Eat, Pray, Love. If you haven't read that book, which a lot of you probably have, I'll bet you've probably heard of it. It was a very famous and popular book. And it's a very simple story. It's the story of her life. She was in her early 30s. Her life had fallen apart. She'd gone through a bad divorce, and it was so depressing to her. She was in a slump. And so she took all of her savings, and she said, I think that if I go on an adventure for a year, I might be able to find the young woman who somehow got lost in all those decisions that I shouldn't have made. And so she went with her savings to Italy for a few months, and that's where she was eating. She went to India for a few more months after that. That's where she prayed. And then she went to Indonesia, last of all, and that's where she searched for joy after eating and relaxing and praying. She said that because the middle part of the book, about 4 months of her journey, were spent in India in an ashram, which is an Indian house of prayer. She's had so many conversations with readers over the years since that book was published, where they would say to her, I am so jealous of you, Elizabeth Gilbert. I wish I could have 4 months to just pray and be by myself. Life is so busy. I wish I could go off and have just 4 months of seclusion without any of the normal life responsibilities there in my face. And she said that what she has said to people in the past 6 or 7 weeks is, how's it going? How's your ashram? And then she said more. She said, do you know how you feel right now? That's what it's like. If you go to a house of prayer and you get real quiet and you get real still, it's going to feel just about exactly like this. Many of the parishioners here know that I go on retreat once a year, always, and usually I go on a silent retreat. And I have had people make amusing comments ever since I started telling them that come on, Father Scott, a silent retreat. Come on. And they'll say, how long do you go for? And usually it's a week, sometimes it's 8 days. And they'll say, come on, in silence? How do you do it? Well, now you know. How do you do anything in life? Sometimes you just get yourself completely settled down. You let go of whatever was going to be the priority, and you realize that in the case of what we're going through right now, survival's our top priority. Whatever plans we had, they're all on hold because nothing's more important than surviving this. So, coronavirus is giving us an opportunity to pray like never before. This is what a retreat experience can be like. We are given time and we are given space to spend some real time to say, just a minute, and listen to the shepherd's voice. On one of my silent retreats, I went to a Trappist monastery. If you were with us yesterday on our Facebook Live broadcast about Gus Lloyd's Mass book, learning all about the Mass, you heard me say that my vestments are made, most of them, at least this alb, this bottom layer, at a monastery in Massachusetts, St. Joseph's Abbey in Spencer. And that is where I was on retreat several years ago. And I was talking, once a day I would meet with one of the monks who was kind of a master spiritual director, Father Gabriel. And in one of the sessions, he was asking me how it was going. And I said, I'm trying to pray, but I just get so darn distracted. Every time I start to sit down and talk to God, these issues or problems keep popping into my brain, and I'm not sure what to do. And he said, pray about those issues. Then you won't be distracted. And that really is the best advice. Pray about the thing that is interrupting your prayer, and then you'll be focused on what really needs your attention. You know that thing that you can't stop thinking about? The problem that is on your mind all the time that keeps you up at night or that you try to get your mind off of, and maybe you're finding yourself using a little too much wine to try to not think about that? That's what you pray about. And that is the best advice. But in order to do any of this, we have to do what my dad did. Just a minute. There can be no prayer without time. If we try to tell ourselves, my whole life is a prayer, everything I do is a prayer, that's beautiful poetry, but it's not true. No one's whole life is a prayer. That's impossible. It is possible that we, through working on ourselves over time, start offering more and more of the minutes and hours of our life to God. That's beautiful and true, but that's not natural. We have to put some time aside. And if you've ever been someone who's gone to Planet Fitness and put in an hour workout, you did something beautiful for your body and really good for your mental health too. But the question would be, how much time are we willing to give to our soul? Because that's what prayer tends to. Prayer does something really important for us that we can gain no other way. It teaches us how to tell the different voices from each other, because there are many voices in our head. And they might be from some insecurity that we have. They are from advertising, big time. Let's not fool ourselves about that. The advertisers have been working on us since we were little, and those messages have stuck. We have messages from the news. If we had somebody in our life who was domineering and was on us all the time, those messages are there. Maybe we've got some messages from our ex that are in our head rattling around. And all of those messages are competing with the shepherd's quiet voice. And the only way we can tune in to the shepherd's voice is to give it time, as if we're straining to hear a faraway bird. Just a minute. Because the shepherd's voice takes that much concentration. And when we get used to hearing it, once we've identified the shepherd's voice, we'll know what it sounds like. And it sounds much more comforting, much more beautiful than the other voices. It sometimes contains challenge, but it never has that shrill tone of someone who's out to get us. So, One of the voices you might have in your head going on right now from coronavirus is, I'm not going to survive this. We're not going to make it. This is going to ruin everything. We're going to be a completely different and worse off country when this is over. We're done for. That's not the shepherd's voice. That is a voice, I acknowledge it, I hear it too, but that is not the shepherd's voice. Nor is the voice that says, you'll never be good enough. Why do you even try? This is what always happens to you. Why do you even put effort in? It's not worth it. That's not the shepherd's voice. The shepherd's voice does not say, you're not enough, but you would be if you bought this product. The shepherd's voice never gives us breaking news. You know how there's always a banner at the bottom of whatever news we're watching saying, there's breaking news. Nothing is breaking to the shepherd. The shepherd knows all. There's no breaking news. So the shepherd's voice is much more likely to say, breathe. I am right here. You are never alone. You are going to get through this. It may not be easy, but that is why I am giving you the gifts of faith and hope and love to get through this. And you are my child, made in my own image and likeness. You have everything you need. You come from me, and you trail wisps of glory everywhere you go. Show them what you're made of. That's the voice of the shepherd. And if you look back over times that you've made decisions in your life, you'll recognize that sometimes that voice was there, but there might have been another voice that said, well, you have to marry him. I mean, the invitations are already out there, and after all, you're not getting any younger. You think you're going to get somebody better? That's not the shepherd's voice. And you look back and you go, wow, I listened to that voice. When there was another voice that said, I know it would be a big mess for me to admit the truth of how I feel about this, but I feel peace when I think about that. There's another voice that says, you don't need anyone else to complete you. So the advice might change depending on what the situation is. And the shepherd is challenging. The shepherd may say, get out of there. And we'll say, why do I want to get out? Because the wolf is coming, the shepherd knows. Get out of there. Get out of there. The shepherd may speak with an abruptness at times, but never with anything but love. With the same loving concern that a parent has, and more than that, because it comes from such a divine source. So maybe a challenge for this week would be to take a look at how much time we're spending watching the news. Do you know there is not much to be gained by watching the news? There's not much. You're going to find out. I was not watching the news when it was announced that there would be no school resuming for the rest of the year. And then the first person who told me, did you hear that school's not going to come back in session? I said, oh, I didn't hear that. And they said, you didn't hear that? And I said, how long ago did they announce it? Oh, an hour ago. What difference is that going to make? I found out. If we would take a little bit of the time that we're spending listening to the news, getting our blood pressure way high, getting our heart racing, we would be in such better shape. We would be dealing with this with so much more peace of mind and equanimity. If we could sit down and find just a little bit of time to say, just a minute. Listen to that voice. You know, one of the things that time does is it provides an opportunity for us to get in rhythm with God. You know, a lot of people deal with AFib, where their heart doesn't beat according to a natural rhythm. That's something that a lot of our parishioners have. Even if that's not your story, you probably have heard somebody who has AFib. And all of us have spiritual AFib. Because when you watch the news, the breaking news pace is and that's not the divine rhythm. The divine rhythm is slow and steady and keeps pulsing love and grace every moment. So when we take time to, just a minute, listen to the shepherd picks us up and holds our heart against the divine heart. You know how we have those pictures in our kitchens, or we did growing up, of the Sacred Heart of Jesus with that glowing heart? That is the divine glowing heart that we are being pressed up against. And so one of people's favorite shepherd songs is like a shepherd. He feeds his flock and gathers those lambs in his arms, holding them carefully close to his heart, leading them home. God's not going to pick us up and by force hold us against the Sacred Heart of Jesus. We have to choose to be picked up, to give the time to say, just a minute. And then when God sees us there, open and receptive, God picks us up with the time that we've given and holds our heart against God's heart so that the AFib can relent and we can return to a natural rhythm. Recently, on the YouTube channel that has my name, I gave some tips on how to pray. I gave 2 videos. One was how to set up a prayer space in your home, and the other one was how to pray. And I will tell you that although setting up the space is a lovely thing to do, and I was really pleased yesterday to cut some fresh flowers to put in a vase so my little prayer area could be beautiful for Good Shepherd Sunday, I have to tell you that the space is not nearly as important as the time. You don't need the space to be anything special. And you don't need to wait until the space is right to do this. You just need to spend a little bit of time. And you don't need words, because the words may be there. And if the words are there, use them. But if the words aren't, you can use that time to just be held against the heart of God and let go of that AFib that's been plaguing you spiritually and adopt the divine rhythm. When I was a priest in Oneonta, my last assignment, there was a woman there who prayed every day, and she had this prayer book that was disgraceful to look at. It was covered in duct tape. It was all old and dingy. And I said to her, wow, you've really used the heck out of that, haven't you? And she said, you know, Father, I've had this for years, and I do pray with it every day. And she said, you know what I always think? I always think, well, if my prayer book is falling apart, maybe I don't have to.